Hi everybody, welcome back to Old Times Talk. I'm your host Landon and I'm excited you're here today. Today's guest is another special one. It's none other than Sharon, also known as Grandma Wheeler. So thank you, Grandma, for being on the podcast today.
You bet.
So to start off, just kind of introduce yourself a little bit.
Okay, I'm Sharon Boyd Wheeler, and I actually grew up here in Washington Terrace. Lived in the Ogden area most of my life, and so I grew up the terrace. Now I live in the terrace. So yeah.
You wish you ever grew up anywhere else?
No. I grew up here and lived here. Dad and I have lived a couple other places. We lived out in Grandpa mentioned we lived up on Adams, which are a little tiny apartment that was built on the side like the washroom, just a little tiny. And then we lived in West Ogden for a couple of years before we moved to South Ogden, which we lived there for about 11 years, and then we moved here. We've been here for 44 years, yeah.
What was your childhood like growing up here?
It was good. I actually lived here in the terrace before the homes were remodeled. It was they were Army barracks where the airmen lived, and my dad was did in the Navy at the time, and so we qualified to live here, and so we lived in. They were long. They were half a house is what we had. They were 2-bedroom homes. At the time, I lived at F44 Navy Way was my address where I lived, and it was a good place. It was a good place to live here in the terrace. It was fun.
What was your family like growing up?
So my family was a little bit different. My mom and dad were divorced when I was about 3. So I don't ever remember any memories of my dad living with me. He was in the Navy at that time. And so most of my memories are with my mom here in the terrace, and my sister Merlene. She was 4.5 years older than I was. It was good. There was a lot of kids in the area, and we played together, and we played at night, and we had games, and it was a fun time to actually live. It was a fun place and a fun time to live.
What was probably your most favorite memory growing up with your sister?
With my sister, probably having her there. She always was the boss because she was always older than I was, and so she was always, telling me what to do, which sisters do. But my mom worked, which in those days moms didn't work. But my mom and dad, like I say, got divorced when I was about 3. And so Mom did work. She worked at a bank. She worked at Commercial Security and then later at Bank of Utah. And so she worked long hours. And so the relationship with my sister was actually, she was, kind of took care of me a lot. And it was good. We got along fairly well. Later on in life, we got along real well. And so that was good. After we both have grown up and had our families, we were very close. Yeah, she was a good sister. Yeah.
How long ago was it since she passed away?
It's been about 6-7 years since Marlene passed away. It is hard when you lose everyone in your family. Yeah, it really is hard, yeah.
Was it interesting going from a really small family and growing into Grandpa's larger family?
Oh, I loved it. I just absolutely loved it. That he had siblings and brothers and sisters. I just absolutely loved it. I always wanted to have brothers and sisters, and I just absolutely loved his family. And we went together a couple of years before he went on his mission. In fact, we had set a wedding date when he actually had left on his mission. We were going to get married, and so, but they were always just really accepting of me, and so yeah, I did love being involved in his family.
Do you feel like that growing up with just one sister and then moving into a larger family, do you feel like that influenced you to having a larger family than most?
I don't know if that influenced me as much as I watched. I have always been a people watcher. And as I was growing up and went to church by myself, and so I really watched people, and I could just see that people had, when they had more children, they seemed to be happier. And I always wanted a larger family. That I always wanted, that was my love, that was my goal, that's what I wanted. Is I wanted to be a mom, I wanted to be married, and I wanted to have a large family. That was probably a goal from the time I was small.
So you mentioned were you the only one that went to church growing up?
Yes, my sister did for a while, but most of the time it was just me. Yeah, it was it was me, and I had wonderful primary teachers. I had wonderful young women teachers and women that I loved and that loved me, and it was just such a wonderful opportunity to have people around and that actually did love me because my mom really wasn't around. I mean, a lot. She left early in the morning, never come home till 7 o'clock at night, and she worked Saturdays until 4 or 5 in the afternoon, and then on Sunday she had to do the wash and do that type of thing. So she never had the opportunity to, if that would have even been her choice. I don't know that. So yeah, but anyway, I loved the young women leaders and so forth. Yeah.
So where you only really had your mom and she wasn't around very much, did you get into some trouble growing up?
Not much. I was really a pretty obedient child, and my sister wasn't, and so I could see where she would get into trouble because she would not quite obey, and mom would be upset with her, and so I think I could see that, and the time with my mom was so precious that I did not want it to be. So I probably was a mom lover and a mom obedient. I really did. Yeah, I really tried to be obedient to my mom.
How were your grades growing up?
I really did pretty good. I liked school, and I really did pretty good. In fact, I was really quite disappointed when I got to high school, and I had thought that I'd go on and be a teacher. And I can remember meeting with the counselor, and she says, "Well, your grades aren't really that great. They were A's and B's, but she said, I don't know if you really would be, really could do it with a teacher." And I remember really being disappointed because that was something I thought I would do until I met Phil. Yeah, and then when I met Phil, my whole life changed. My whole goals of what I wanted to do and so forth changed. But yeah.
And as you mentioned, right, you had a wedding date set before Grandpa even went on a mission.
Yeah.
When he was on his mission, what was life like with that? Where you loved him, but he was gone for, was it 3 years at the time, right? 2.
It was probably the hardest time in my life. That was probably we had grown so close, and he was such a dear friend to me, and we'd planned our future, and I knew he had to go on a mission. I mean, I knew that. I knew for our sake of our whole future that he needed to go. But that was probably the hardest thing I ever have done. I was just so alone, just so lonely. And my friends, of course, then had gone off to college and, and so forth. And so it was really, it was a hard time. It was a hard 2 years, but we made it. We made through it. And so, yeah, there was several bumps, but we worked through them, and it was good. Yeah.
Did you date anybody before Grandpa?
I did. Yeah. That was before the 16 date type thing. And in fact, in the terrace, we had what we call a canteen, and they had a dance every Friday and Saturday night. And I had lots of cute little boyfriends and stuff. And as I got 15, 16, I dated several guys. And then when I met Grandpa, just, hey, could see what he really was. But yeah, there was a few other guys in my life.
Did Grandpa have to kind of fight his way to win your love, sort of thing?
Only one. There was only one, but yeah. I had a friend that was in the army, and I can remember he came home and was at the house, and Phil came in one day, and I thought, what's this feeling? You know, it was really, he probably doesn't remember it, but I thought, oh, what is this feeling? It was just something new, but yeah. Anyway, it was good. We had just been friends for a long time, but no, he didn't have to fight for me.
Now, how did you two meet?
So we actually met through, he lived in Taylor, and I was going to school at Weber, and I had some friends from Taylor, and they kept on saying, we've got this guy we want you to meet. We've got this guy we want you to meet, you know. And I actually was going with a kid from Morgan at the time, but we've got to meet this guy. So finally they said, hey, we're coming after Mutual. And at the time I was working at J&K Drive-In out on 4th and Washington. I was a car hop. And so they come in after Mutual one night, because he said, I am not going on any blind date. I've got to see her first. And so, so they come in with the whole carload of people, you know, come in from Taylor after Mutual one night, so he could take a look-see. And I guess he liked what he seen. So anyway, he called me, and yeah, we went on a date, and we was with his cousin Dean and my friend Diane, and we went to a movie and stuff, and then we come home, and yeah, it was good.
What was one of the most fun, memorable dates that you have with Grandpa?
One of the things that we did that was always fun, and again, it was more of the time, is they, on Saturday nights, they had out the 16th Ward, which was down over the 21st Street Viaduct, have dances. Every Saturday night they would have dances. And so that's actually what we done. Every Saturday night we'd go to dance, and that was really fun. And then before he went on his mission, of course, we went to the school dances, and that was always special to have him here to be able to go to the school dances with me too.
Did Grandpa, you feel like, set the standard for how a man should treat a woman for your boys?
He did. I probably thought they should have treated me better. You know, a mother wants to be treated right there. But I think he set the standard that, you know, that most times he did. And my boys really treated me good. As they got a little bit older, there'd be once in a while that they would get a little bit upset with me and so forth, but yeah.
With your kids, what would you say is one of the most, if you got a phone call from the school, what was probably the most like heart-dropping call you ever got about one of your kids?
Probably that they were supposed to be at school and they weren't. That was probably one of the hardest, when the school was, you know, this child, you know, so and so is not at school today when he was supposed to have been there. That's probably the hardest. So yeah.
Did you have a favorite sport that you liked watching your kids participate in?
So when I grew up, sports were not a big thing, and I never was very strong that I never played sports. And so really it wasn't a big deal in my life until I had 5 boys. And then it became a big thing for the sports. And if they wanted to play them, we encouraged them all to try, and then what they wanted to do. And we loved to go watching them. I don't think there was any that we really didn't like. The hardest thing was when Kevin played track, or ran track, and at that time you sat up there for like 3-4 hours for the whole thing. Now they've got it so you kind of go for the thing, but I think Kevin's track was the hardest one. But yeah, we loved watching him. We loved watching the kids in the football. Boyd will tell you that I had him wear special socks so I could figure out where he was when he played football, and you know, and so forth. But we loved when they played soccer. Todd was on the swim team at Bonneville, and the boys, several were on the football team, so they were good. Yeah, we love to watch our kids, and then we love to watch our grandkids. That's been such a joy in our life, to be able to watch our kids and grandkids, because that's been our whole focus, is our family and our kids.
Definitely makes a difference in our lives knowing that we have grandparents that support us.
And maybe that's why I feel like it was because my grandparents were. I had wonderful grandparents. I really did. I had mom's parents lived in Malad, and I spent the summers, a lot of the summers when I was younger, up in Malad, and they were wonderful people. And then my other grandmother, Grandma Stallings, she married. She was Boyd, Finn, and Stallings, and she was really good too. They were good, but those times they never come and supported you type thing, and so I guess that's why maybe that was a important thing to do. Yeah.
As a mom and a grandma, and now a great grandma, how do you feel like your role has been influenced by time?
I've always said so many times I wish I could do do-overs. If I could do over with my kids, I would love to have a do-over, because I have realized so many things as I have got older. I've realized things that I did not realize when I got married, when I first got married. And when I first became a mom, I just wished I would have had more patience and more. I loved my kids and they know I loved them, but just maybe to show it more, just to have more patience with them and be present for them. Because I think where we had 7, it was a little crazy. And I think not sometimes, a lot of times I just kind of lost my cool. And there was a lot of times in our lives that Grandpa wasn't here because of the church responsibilities that he'd had for 18 years. He wasn't really around a lot. So it was, if I could just do it over, I would just honestly try to be more patient and just be more with my kids. I think that's the more important. But you can't do do-overs. So all you can do is just love them and just let them know. But I think that is the patience, just more patience and more caring. Yeah. That's where we're at. So.
When I think of Grandma Wheeler, right, I think, family history and reading. Like those are kind of the two, and quilting, obviously quilting. But what kind of got you into family history work?
I think what really got me into family history was in the 70s. I realized that my dad's line, the Boyd line, was not in the church. That there wasn't a lot of boys. My Grandma Stallings had married a man that was not a member of the church. And so I started doing the family, trying to find the names and stuff at that time. And the scriptures are really true, where it tells you that, and it does, it just comes in your heart. And so I started when Grandpa was gone. He always had meetings on Tuesday nights when he was a clerk, when he was a counselor, and when he was a bishop. And so on that time, I'd get the kids to bed, and then I can remember we lived over on South Ogden. I had a heater, and I'd sit in front of that heater and I'd write letters to relatives and to newspapers and to cemeteries and to funeral homes and so forth, trying to find out more info on the Boyd's line. But that's what really got me, was the Boyd line. And then, of course, it just took off from there, And it has been my love forever, and I love family history, and I don't do as much now. Family Search came in, and they have been such a big help, and they can do so much more now. But I love the hands-on, get in, dig, search. It's what I loved. I love that. And now every time I get in Family Search, they've changed it. It's hard to figure out how to do it. They've tried to make it easier, and I just was used to getting into the real records. Now they give you the information, and just digging around. But that's how it started with Grandpa's line, with my dad's line, because it wasn't in the church. So.
What is probably one of the most interesting tidbits of information you learned from doing family history about your family line?
I think one of the things that I have learned the most is they are not just a name, they are really part of you. That's your history, that's who they are. I was in correspondence with a lot of people back in Ohio and Pennsylvania and Kansas, and they were real people. And I think this is what, when you go to the temple, you're doing something for a real person. And I think that's what has taught me the most. And then also, I think the fact that you are doing a service that they can't do for themselves. And it is such a big blessing in your lives for the opportunity to be able to go to the temple and be able to feel the peace and the love there and know you're doing something for someone else that they cannot do for themselves. And I think that has been probably been the one of the most wonderful things, that just knowing that you're able to do that.
What got you into quilting?
So this was really kind of fun. So with our travel group, we in 2012, and Grandpa and I joined this travel group in 1999. So that tells you how long we've been in it. Such a fun group of people, and we have done so much good. We've done so much service, and along with traveling and having such a good time, we've done so much service. But we're up by Garland, and we've got a new couple there. And I actually went to school with him. It's Pam and Dar Brimhall, and I got into school with Dar, and I knew who Pam was, and so we're up there, and I walk over to their rig, and she's out there, and she's cutting up material. Well, my thought always was, why would you pay that much for a yard for material, cut it up, and then sew it back together? That's the stupidest thing I'd ever heard. And so, anyway, I went over to talk to her and see how she's doing, and she's showing me what she's doing. And what she's doing is she's cutting all these pieces up, and then she's sewing them back together, and they look like a telescope, anyway, they're all different. So she's using the same material, but coming out with this most fantastic block that's totally different. And so she said, well, let's go get you some material. So we actually ran into Logan to their Walmart and picked up some material. And anyway, I made this quilt. It took me about 3 months to make it. I was hooked. I just absolutely was hooked. And I've just decided it's because both of my grandmothers were quilters, and it's in my blood. But I absolutely have just loved. It's hard. It's not easy. I unpick a lot. In fact, Grandpa said, hey, you unpick as much as you sew, and sometimes I do. But anyway, the perfection me that's kind of bad for a quilter. But anyway, I love my quilts. I love every one I make. Every one I make, when I get it done, I think, oh, I love this the most. And then the next one, oh, I love this the most. But that was how I got into it. Pam is the one that said, hey, and yeah, it's become a big part of my life now, which I am so grateful for, because it has. It's really been important. Yeah.
When you first did it, right, was it like, were you getting frustrated a lot, or was it almost a secondhand nature?
No, I still get frustrated. I still get frustrated with it. It's to me, it's I love it, and I love what I'm doing, but it still frustrates me when they are all different. Every quilt I do is different, and there's different. Even when I've done 2 different quilts, and it was really kind of interesting. The one just worked out smooth as smooth, and then when I did the second one, exactly the same quilt, it was really hard, and I had nothing but problems. And so you just never know what's going to happen. But I try to stay calm. But yeah, sometimes it just frustrates me. Yeah. But I do love it. I love it when it's done, when I see what I've accomplished. Yeah.
Have you ever literally put your sweat, blood, and tears into a quilt?
Probably every time I make it. Probably every quilt I've ever made. But I'm so grateful that Grandpa has supported me, because when I started this, and I asked Pam, I said, well, is this expensive? Because, Grandpa and I have been pretty frugal our whole lives. And she said, oh, yeah, it's not bad. And Dar said, oh, well, maybe it is. And it has been real expensive. But Grandpa has really supported me in this, almost too much. because he's let me have a free hand, and I spent way too much money. I have way too much material I'll never leave, never have time to use. But he's been so good. But he did give me a kind of a restriction. He said, if you're going to make something, you need to make it big enough so that it'll be useful. And so this is why 9/10 of my quilts are big. So they can be used on a bed, or they can be, yeah. But it's Grandpa's fault. I'll have to tell you a story. Both my grandmothers made me a quilt when I got married. And of course, the same thing. I just didn't want to use it because it's really a life sake. So as you know, when we went on our mission, then you guys lived in our home, you know. So when we came back from our mission, it'd been a while, and I said to Dad, I need to get those quilts out. Well, I knew right where they were, right? I went there, and they weren't there. And anyway, your poor mom, I called. Do you remember seeing these quilts? Anyway, she didn't. So now we've been home from our mission. We come back in 2003. So we've been home 22 years from our mission. And so we have looked, and I've turned this house upside down. We've been through everything. And what I kept on saying was, I don't dare die, because I don't dare go to heaven and see my grandmas without they know I've lost their quilt. You know, I didn't take good enough care of them that I lost their quilt. So last year, when Keely was downstairs bringing some Christmas things up for me, and she says, Grandma, I found a tote down there, and they had quilts in them. And I said, oh, really? And I said, what color? And she said, pink. And I said, no, it's not it. They're both purple, you know. And so then I'm whining about a few days later to Brad. He says, well, let's just bring it up. So he went down and brought the tote up, and we opened it, and it was my quilt. So after all these years, I have found my grandmother's quilt. That's the purple one right there, and the pink one is this one was Grandma Gleed made me, the purple one, and then the pink one Grandma Stallings made me is in the other room. And so I have got my quilts, and so now I can go meet my grandmothers, because now they know how much I love my quilts. And I appreciate them so much more, because I know the time and the effort that went into them. And I love them that much more now. I appreciate them so much more than I did when I first got married. So that's my fun story about my quilts.
For those listening, I mean, she makes every grandkid, when they get married, they get a quilt for their wedding, and they get to choose the colors and the pattern. And I remember when we first got married, we used it as our, whatever you call it, our comforter, our spread. And I was like, I don't want to use this. I mean, it's just so nice. And so we now let it hang, and we see it every day. But I couldn't bear the thought of possibly ripping it or ruining it, because they're nice and they hold a sentimental value to them.
It is, but I never used it, and they probably would have liked me to use it. Yeah, but that's it. It's beautiful.
That's crazy, because that quilt, I mean, it looks just as new as the other ones.
Yeah, it'll be 64 years old. Yeah, both of them.
If you could pick up a new hobby right now, what do you think it would be?
I don't know what a new hobby would be. I think sometimes your interest comes in the things that you do. You know, like there's things that I wanted to do, like I wanted to play golf and a few of these type of things that I never did pick up, but I don't have any desire now. But I just think sometimes you do. And at this point in my life, I don't know if there's anything that I would want to pick up new. Continue, yes. And my time I want to spend on my quilts and my family history, you know, and of course the temple. Yeah. So love the temple.
What do you think is the most innovative piece of technology that you've used in your life?
There are so many, like Grandpa said, there are so many things that have come, and I love that we have all these wonderful conveniences and so forth. And I don't know which I would say is the most. I thought his cell phone was really good. I think the computer has just been the things that you're able to do and find on the computer, and I think it's just wonderful that they've got that technology. But The TVs are so wonderful now too that we have things that are at our fingertip, the news and that, that type of thing that we never had before, or, maybe the internet. I mean, maybe the internet is it. I mean, how often do I go to Google to look up things, and we certainly never had those, you know, but I probably, a couple times a day go to Google to ask questions that I don't know the answer. And sometimes they have an answer I like, and sometimes they don't. But yeah, it would be probably the internet to me, maybe. Yeah, it's wonderful.
I would say that most of the people listening would agree that, Google came out a year before not a year, it came out a month before I was born. So I grew up using the internet. So if for me, the things I see, I'm like, I already know how to use the internet. It's just sometimes they update it or change it. But for you, right, how eye-opening was it from going from not having that resource to having it?
It's fantastic. Just such a fantastic, and it's gone step by step. I mean, technology has come, and it's come step by step, and you learn how to do that, and then you go to the next step, and it's just like a ladder, and it's just got where it's been just made life so much easier in so many ways. And I think in a way it's made us move faster, because now we have more time, and so we actually are doing a lot more things in our lives and accomplishing a lot more than we did, or people did in other days, because they didn't have time. They had to do other things. So
What would you say has been the hardest trial that you've gone through in this life?
I think maybe, gosh, to be real honest here, is the gospel of Jesus Christ has been such an important part of my life. And so I think probably the hardest thing in my life is to have family, my parents, some of my grandparents, and just some of just family, that it doesn't mean as much to them as it does to me. And no matter how I tried, I couldn't do it. And we know it has to be the Lord and the Spirit that touches people. But I think that's probably been the hardest thing in my life, is them not being able to have the joy and the peace of the temple in their lives. That's where I've always gone for peace, and it's sad that they don't know what they're missing. Yeah, I think that's probably the saddest thing. Yeah.
What is a piece of life advice that you would give?
I think my whole life has been to try to serve. And I know as we grow up and we look at, people would say, well, what's your talent? What can you do? Well, there's a lot of things I've tried in my life, and tried to play the piano. I can't sing. And I've tried to do things. And so I'd look and think, well, what is my talent? What can I do? And I think my whole life has been is I can serve. And I think that's is just try to think of what you can do to help others, just to try to serve. And now as Dad and I've got older and not able to do a lot of the things that we've done in the past, am I using that for an excuse? Maybe. But, that's just to be able to serve, no matter what it is, even if it's just a smile, just to be kind to people, and no matter what people, where they are. And I have tried to do that. I have really tried to be kind to people throughout my life. And so just be kind and serve and love.
Well, thank you for being on the podcast today. I really appreciate it, and for helping me out with this.
Thank you for the opportunity. We could probably think of lots of other things we could have said, but, thank you for that opportunity.
Thanks for tuning in to Old Times Talk. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss when wisdom drops. If you or someone you know would like to be interviewed on this podcast, head to oldtimestalk.com and click on the referral tab. And remember, keep the old stories alive. But with that, I'm Landon, and this is Old Times Talk.